The gods found themselves unable to speak, as they trembled with anguish and fear. They knew that this event was the first presage of Ragnarok, the downfall and death not just of themselves, but of the very cosmos they maintained. In Norse mythology, the death of the Aesir god, Baldr, is the first sign of Ragnarok, which can be translated as end of an era, twilight of the gods, fate of the gods, or doom of the gods. In Elden Ring, the precipitating event for the Shattering, the great war between the demigod children of Queen Marika, was the death of Godwyn the Golden on the Night of the Black Knives. The death of Godwyn destabilized the lands between, likely due to Godwyn serving as a symbol of sorts for the Golden Order. As Godwyn is the only demigod child of Marika and Godfrey that is not an omen, and is the progenitor of the Golden lineage that was used to propagate faith and adherence to the Golden Order. I find it fascinating how many similarities can be found between Godwyn the Golden and Baldr of the Aesir gods. I've already presented the primary similarity between the two characters, which is that both of these godly figures were each assassinated, events that each subsequently led to chaos and destruction in both Norse mythology and in Elden Ring. More specifically, the significance of Baldr, as well as Godwyn, is primarily centered upon their deaths, as their deaths are catalysts for events that directly threaten the gods and universe itself. In Norse mythology, Baldr was considered to be a god of light, wisdom, and courage, though these were never official titles. Similarly, Godwyn is shown to have been the most beloved and resplendent of Marika's demigod children, hence the moniker Godwyn the Golden. Now, to redeem myself for mistakes made in my previous lore video, I will recount the assassination of Baldr. Baldr was born to Odin and Frigg, and was a twin to the blind god of the night, Hodr. Early on in his life, his mother and Vanir goddess, Frigg, crafted a spell or enchantment to protect Baldr from all ailments, both physical and magical. However, she did not protect him from mistletoe, as it seemed to be so meager and harmless a material. Later on, though, in Baldr's life, he was beloved by all the gods and considered the most beautiful and just of them all. Yet Loki, who in many ways can be viewed as the architect of Ragnarok, learns of Baldr's weakness, and upon acquiring this information, he crafts an arrow, or spear in some versions, from sharpened mistletoe and tricks Baldr's twin Hodr into firing the mistletoe arrow, which strikes home and ends Baldr's life. Though in one version of the tale, the mistletoe greatly weakens Baldr, and he is killed by someone in his weakened state, likely Loki in disguise. The gods were dumbfounded that this could have occurred, and Loki was imprisoned for having caused Baldr's death, not long after the assassination and shortly before the start of Ragnarok. After Baldr's physical body was given a burial at sea, Hermod went to Helheim to try and retrieve Baldr's soul. However, he would ultimately be unsuccessful. Hermod claimed that all beings, especially the gods, yearned for the return of Baldr. The condition set by the goddess Hel for Baldr's soul to be relinquished from her domain was that all beings in existence must weep for Baldr, and his soul would be returned. If this is so, then let everything in the cosmos weep for him, and I will send him back to you. But if any refuse, he will remain in my presence. While everyone in the universe cried and wept simultaneously, Loki held back tears and prevented himself from crying a single drop of liquid, and thus, Baldr's soul was to remain in Helheim. The inability to recover Baldr's soul is when many of the gods knew Ragnarok was soon to come. Much like Baldr is the most beloved god, Godwyn was the most beloved demigod, yet they each met their end quite unceremoniously. Elden Ring's story insinuates that the Rune of Death was necessary to kill Godwyn's soul, as well as Ranni's body, suggesting there was some level of invulnerability the demigods possessed. And perhaps the moniker Godwyn the Golden also related to him being a symbol of purity and invulnerability for the Golden Order itself. While Godwyn could easily be an analog for Baldr, I also believe that Ranni's actions on the Night of the Black Knives could parallel Hodr's actions when tricked by Loki. While Ranni is not the twin of Godwyn, she is, at least with the current information available, a half-sibling of Godwyn, and she represents the cold night and the moon, which seems to be the inverse of Godwyn the Golden's propensity toward the golden light of the Golden Order. A surface-level parallel is that, like Loki, Ranni betrays and attempts to free herself from the god. Moreover, if you subscribe to the theory that Marika is the one who orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives, it makes me wonder how much of Ranni's actions were of her own free will, and not actually manipulated by Marika. In this scenario, Marika could parallel the efforts of Loki, who was paving the road for Ragnarok, and perhaps it could be argued that Marika was similarly paving the way for the Shattering, as she had perhaps become disillusioned by the Greater Will and its Golden Order. However, I could also understand how the Night of the Black Knives could have been solely on the shoulders of Ranni, especially if it were to more directly parallel the death of Baldr, as Baldr's mother Frigg would not have wanted this to happen to her son. So we must ask ourselves, would Marika have let her most beloved son be killed? Or is she cold and calculated enough to have planned Godwyn's death herself? In the tale of Baldr's death, his soul goes to Helheim, which rests below Yggdrasil, much like Baldr's soulless body resting at the roots of the Erd Tree. While not explicitly mentioned in Norse mythology, it would seem as though the Norse Aesir gods wanted to return Baldr's soul to Asgard, likely Valhalla specifically, as he was no mere mortal and had always resided in the land of the gods. A parallel can be drawn between Baldr's soul being unable to leave Helheim and Godwyn being unable to die a true death, such as Miquella had tried to achieve for him to no avail. In both cases, the current condition of the golden god/demigod was to bring them true peace in death, though in both instances this could not be achieved. Baldr's soul could not be rescued from below the World Tree, and Godwyn's body could not be truly laid to rest beneath the Erd Tree. As Baldr's death is his primary claim to fame in Norse mythology, it's difficult for me to say the next parallel is for certain, though I do find the choice of having Baldr travel via dragon in the 2018 God of War game to be an interesting choice. I've not been able to find any sources that detail Baldr befriending dragon, though he was seen as an energetic and diplomatic god, so perhaps it's possible. Regardless of whether or not there are documents discussing it, Baldr in the God of War game clearly has some relationship with the dragons, similar to Godwyn having fought and befriended the dragon Fortisax, a dragon who, along with Miquella, would attempt to provide Godwyn with a true death of body and soul. While not a huge find, it's interesting to me that Godwyn shares so many similarities with the god Baldr, especially one that relates to the interpretation of Baldr in a separate game. As is well known by now, Godwyn's burial at the roots of the Erd Tree corrupted the Erd Tree and the lands between, causing an influx of Deathroots to arise in the lands between, and subsequently gave rise to those who live in death. They appear as slightly larger skeletal humans. While they attack slowly, if they're not properly killed, they'll continue to reanimate. To properly kill them, one must continue attacking them when they have a white glow until it dissipates, indicating it's truly dead. Deathroots are aspects of the Rune of Death, and now they are proliferating the lands between, giving rise to those who live in death, of which Godwyn is the first, hence the title Godwyn, Prince of Death, as he is the first of those who live in death. Deathroot lore is a bit of a contentious topic at times, as it's not entirely clear as to the effects it has on the lands between other than giving rise to those who live in death. Essentially, those who are dead yet cannot seem to die. They live in a constant state of death, unable to be reborn or absorbed into the Erd Tree. One of the most fascinating finds recently is the elucidation as to how Godwyn's visage can be seen underneath Stormveil Castle, with the answer being simply Deathroot. If one is to look closely at veins of festering Deathroot growing not only underneath Stormveil Castle, but across the lands between, eyes can be seen emerging from the Deathroot almost as if Godwyn's body is spreading itself out in the form of Deathroot across the lands, which begs the question of how involved Godwyn is in this, as he seemingly is a lifeless husk, yet perhaps something else is using Godwyn's body as a vessel for death. While it's a revelation to learn that Godwyn's malformed likeness seems to be manifesting itself all across the lands between, we still do not have clear answers as to why Godwyn looks like a deformed chimera, just like I don't have clear answers as to why so few people who watch my videos are subscribed. But whatever. Another item I think could hold a great deal of lore significance is the Prince of Death's pustule, which can be found on a corpse near the grotesque aspect of Godwyn that is growing in the crypt of Stormveil Castle. The pustule reads as follows: a fetid pustule taken from facial flesh raises vitality. Vitality governs resistance to the effects of death. It is said that this pustule came from the visage of the Prince of Death, he who used to be called Godwyn, as first dead of the demigods. It's said he's buried deep under the capital, at the Erd Tree's roots. So the Prince of Death's pustule is not only found nearby an aspect of Godwyn's corpse, but the description informs us that this is taken from facial flesh, which is almost undoubtedly the flesh of Godwyn. The item itself also mirrors how Deathroot spreads and grows throughout the lands between, as it appears as though eyes are forming on this pustule as well. The fact that this item and an aspect of Godwyn's corpse can be found here, it does beg the question as to why there is an ulcerated tree spirit in the Stormveil Castle crypt as well. Furthermore, another item called the Prince of Death's cyst, which appears visually similar to the pustule, reads, a fetid overgrown cyst taken from facial flesh, greatly raises vitality. Vitality governs resistance to the effects of death. It is said that this cyst came from the corrupted visage of one unable to die a true death. Indeed, it comes from the Prince of Death, scion of the Golden Bow, and first of the dead among the demigods. Now, I believe there to be an ulcerated tree spirit near the aspect of Godwyn's corpse in Stormveil Castle, as these tree spirits are effectively the offspring of Godwyn's death. To explain, the tree avatars that we see protecting minor Erd trees throughout the game only came into existence after the Shattering, as it was the Erd tree's will to protect its seeds and sprouts. and the Staff of the Avatar and Guardian Bracers items insinuate that the guardians of the minor Erd trees transformed into Erd tree avatars after the shattering. As the item descriptions read, ceremonial staff depicting the Erd tree in its historic radiance, wielded by the avatars who protected the minor Erd trees. The avatars, emerging in the wake of the Elden Ring's shattering, were determined to protect the withering Erd tree's offspring. Engraved golden bracers, worn by the guardians of the minor Erd trees. In accordance with an ancient pact of the Erd tree, it is said that their deaths led not to destruction, but instead to be renewed, eternal life as guardians. However, as ulcerate means develop into or become affected by an ulcer, and an ulcer can be defined as an open sore on an external or internal surface of the body, caused by a break in the skin or mucous membrane that fails to heal. The ulcerated tree spirits are likely symptoms of Godwyn being buried at the roots of the Erd tree, as they are typically grotesque and appear to be festering with disease. They could perhaps be viewed as the inverse of the tree avatars, as the tree spirits are corrupted, festering components of the Erd tree, whereas the tree avatars appear this way because of a pact the guardians of the minor Erd trees made while still humans. These tree spirits are effectively cursed by Godwyn, as the Deathroot has likely corrupted them, as they are perhaps meant to be carriers of golden seeds, as you do typically receive a golden seed for defeating a tree spirit. Moreover, the tree spirits oftentimes appear in locations that are related to Godwyn in some way, such as the tree spirit seemingly guarding the aspect of Godwyn's corpse and pustule, as well as one in the mountain tops of the Giants that guards a chest containing Deathroot. The tree spirits serve as another example of how influential Godwyn's death and burial have become, as these spirits represent the death and corruption that is festering within the Erd tree's roots. This corruption is also present in another item description, that of the Death Prince's staff embedded with sullied amber, said to be a very part of the Prince of Death, enhances death sorceries. One of the staves deemed heretical by the Academy for its ability to allow sorceries to be augmented through faith in addition to intelligence. The Death Prince's staff description describes the staff as being embedded with sullied amber, which harkens back to the sap of the Erd tree, as the sap becomes amber over time and depending on the type of sap can be used for different purposes, such as restoring health or stamina. However, now Godwyn's corpse has putrefied the sap of the Erd tree, hence the term sullied amber. This amber no longer has the same properties given by the grace of the Erd tree. To sully something means to damage the purity or integrity of, defile. To compare, take a look at the descriptions of the Crimson Amber Medallion, as well as the description for the Cerulean Amber Medallion, which both explain that the Erd tree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious of jewels in the age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. A primordial life energy resides within. This description serves as another example that Godwyn's death and corruption of the Erd tree likely accelerated the law of regression within the Golden Order, as several items describe how people never thought that the Erd tree would not be a symbol of purity and protection, yet the death of Godwyn swiftly brought an end to this golden age. Moreover, I think these items demonstrate that the Deathroot is being spread through the sap of the Erd tree, sap that prior to having been infected by Godwyn's corpse, was a great boon and blessing for the people in the lands between. My opinion and speculation on the matter of Godwyn's appearance is that he has become a representation of the crucible, as the crucible is defined as the time when all life was blended and arose from, and I think that Godwyn's unusual soul death, along with the body death of Ranni, has led to Godwyn's corpse taking on aspects of the crucible. We know that the crucible in some form is the primordial version of the Erd tree, and by extension the Elden Ring itself. Perhaps because Godwyn was not given a proper death, this triggered the law of regression within the Golden Order, as now the rules of life and death set by the Elden Ring have been broken, leading to regression and breakdown of the Golden Order, which, in my opinion, is simply a way to contain the power and energy of the crucible in the first place. As mentioned, the law of regression is built into the Golden Order, and this could be the reason why Morgott and Mohg are omens, as they were born with the aspects of the crucible, the more untamed version of the Elden Ring. I don't exactly know why Godwyn was not born an omen. He does seem to still be connected to the crucible, as he slowly becomes what almost appears to be a physical representation of the crucible, as he appears to be merging of several forms of life. Perhaps the law of regression works on a faster timeline than many would expect, as Godwyn was the firstborn of Marika and Godfrey, and had no readily apparent flaws, yet their next children were considered to be blasphemous in their very existence. Moreover, it's clear that the law of regression is also at work on Godwyn's golden lineage, as Godric appears to be a shadow of what Godwyn once was, generations prior. Furthermore, part of the description of the law of regression says, regression is the pole of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. Thus, perhaps Godwyn's death sped up the process of the Golden Order, and lands between converging back into the primordial crucible. I wonder then, if Godwyn died an unnatural death in regards to the way life and death are currently handled by the Elden Ring, and that this break in the Golden Order perhaps paved a way for the crucible to slowly seep back into the lands between, actively accelerating the return of the crucible. While I would like to delve even deeper into the crucible in an upcoming video, my current belief about the crucible is that it represented the natural order of life in the cosmos, and the Elden Ring was a way to harness and control this power, specifically by the outer god, the greater will, much how Odin gained immense power over the cosmos after discovering runes. Thus, once the Golden Order set by the Elden Ring was in jeopardy, the power of the crucible began to seep out and cause disarray, as now the natural order and Golden Order are at direct odds with one another, and the mortals and the lands between must take the brunt of these conflicting forces. Though Godwin has been given the title of Prince of Death, perhaps a more fitting name would be Prince of the Crucible, or Crucible Prince, as he may be a conduit through which aspects of the crucible are manifesting, such as the principle of death, which is currently missing from the Golden Order, though is almost undoubtedly an aspect of the crucible, the melting pot from which all life arose. Moreover, if you use Fia's Mending Rune, then you restore the principle of death to the Golden Order. Unlike Morgott and Mohg, who still have their souls and thus have a stronger connection to the Golden Order and its principles, Godwyn's soulless corpse may be the perfect conduit for the crucible to manifest itself, as he is simply an empty shell that can be used by primordial forces to reclaim the lands between. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested in seeing more lore and theory videos like this one, consider subscribing to the channel and commenting on what you'd like to see next. In the meantime though, make sure you drink some water and go touch some grass.